All right. Welcome, Amit. Can you
Thank
introduce
you.
yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Wasai. My name is Amit Kumaria, and I have spent nearly 30 years, 3 decades, figuring out how to make businesses more profitable. And whether that's a company that I've built from the ground up or someone else's vision that just needs a better strategy, I've been deep in the trenches of revenue generation. That's sort of what I do. And I've worked across many sectors: public, private, big business, small business, you name it. And the through line I have always seen through all of this, through all of my experience, is that relationships move money. And the right person at the right time with the right approach, that's the growth formula that most people miss. And along the way, I've built some incredible relationships with people. You included Osai, and those relationships have really made the difference, not just in dollars but also in direction.
Mm. And that's something that I really respect and appreciate about you. You're very good at building relationships. And then when the right opportunity presents itself, you make sure that it's a win-win opportunity for both parties. So that was why I reached out to you about talking about managing stakeholders. And so I'd love for you to talk about what does that mean? Like, what do you mean by stakeholders? And why is this relationship so often overlooked by
Mm-hmm.
founders?
Yeah, that's a really good question to level set. Really good first question. To me, I think, and this may vary across the board for different people, but to me, the word stakeholders means anyone who has a say in your success, really, or the power to stop it. And that can include anyone from customers, investors, team members, suppliers, regulators, even that one former boss who still picks up your calls. You know, Early stage founders are always sprinting. They're people that are typically product obsessed, especially in the early stages. And in that chaos, it's been my experience that we often treat relationships like things that are nice to have, instead of a must-have. And that's one thing that I've really learned to shift my thinking on. Here's the secret, Osai: a warm intro, a trusted referral, a champion in the room. That's how growth actually happens. And it's not just what you build; it's who believes in what you're building. And to me, that's the meaning of a stakeholder.
That's so I really like the way you just described that because oftentimes we're thinking about stakeholders as, people with the purse strings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those relationships, those high leverage relationships. How does managing these stakeholder relationships and just managing these kinds of things, how does it help to with credibility and access and trust? And how can we, as founders or early stage founders, how can we make sure that we are managing those relationships and um, we don't go against this whole trust thing that's really important for whether it's the warm intro or things like that.
Yeah, good question as well. And I think that so many founders of companies and businesses think that they need to sort of prove themselves before they can ask for anything. And this is certainly a trap that I've fallen into as well, as someone who has dipped my toe into entrepreneurial pursuits. It's that attitude that's sort of, let me hit X revenue before I reach out, so that I can prove myself or prove that I'm worth talking to. But the reality is that high leverage relationships are built on potential and not perfection. And I think that's one thing that I've really learned over the years, in my time doing this. And I think the challenge comes is that founders often assume that they need polish when what people really want is clarity on vision, clarity on values, that type of thing. And they think that credibility comes from metrics, but and while metrics are important, I'm not discounting the importance of metrics and data, but it also comes from your energy and your consistency, and showing up like you belong in the room. And even if you're still at a point where you're figuring things out, there are things that you can demonstrate energy and consistency just by showing up. And I think that's one thing that gets really discounted by early stage founders in these and these stakeholder relationships that really gets overlooked.
Wow. I have never thought about it this way, just like about clarity and potential, because I am one to reach out to people and just ask. And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. Um, so for somebody who didn't grow up with all those relationships, I think there is that assumption that, oh, the rich kids are the ones that have those kinds of relationships and stuff. But so they have this mental block of, okay, maybe I need to get to that point before I reach out. What would you recommend that they do, or how would you
Yeah.
recommend that they approach that kind of thinking?
Yes. So, it's been a shift for me as well. Relationships don't live on your to-do list. It's not a task. And I think that's the important thing to think about. To me, they live in your calendar. And that's sort of the shift that I've sort of realized. So instead, I think the shift for me has been, instead of thinking, I need to go out and network, what it has become is I'm going to spend 30 minutes this week just checking in on folks I respect. No agenda, no real ask, just connection. And from my perspective, that has really worked, because the other thing that I've learned is that urgency typically fades and trust compounds. That's something a former mentor kind of taught me early on in my life that has sort of resonated for me almost in every aspect of every professional endeavor that I've encountered. And if you're only reaching out when you need something, people feel that. People can see that. People can sense that. But if you show up consistently, like I said previously, or even just casually, that sort of builds what we call relational equity, and to me, as I said off the top, relationships, that's money in the bank, and that's what really counts as far as I'm concerned.
Mm, that's so good. And trust compounds. That is such a good way to look at it. And I'm just thinking, someone might be saying, well, what do I have to offer? Right? Like, I
Yeah.
want to reach out, but I don't think I have much to offer. Like, I'm going to reach out to my former boss or to somebody who can potentially invest in my organization or something like that. Um, so they don't know how to just like take that first step. What is something that has worked for you in the past?
I really think I- um, when you have strong stakeholder relationships, this sort of thinking has sort of come in handy for me. You sort of stop playing catch up and you start playing, I guess, chess, for lack of a better word, right? And suddenly you're not just reacting to the market, but you're kind of shaping it in a way. And for underrepresented founders, to me, that's even more powerful, because that lets you be real. And sometimes the system doesn't see your genius right away. Let's face it, that happens quite often. But if you've got a customer who won't stop, singing your praises, or an investor who calls you, the one to watch or something like that, or a competitor who's now reaching out to collaborate, that sort of shifts the entire narrative. So I think, for me, the understanding of that has sort of really come in handy, and relationships sort of become your resume in that way. And as I said, operate as currency, and they open doors that data alone just can't open. So from that perspective, that sort of thinking has sort of helped me. It's probably a high level answer to your question, but one that comes to mind right away.
Mm. Yes, that's very helpful. Just realizing that it's not about catching up. Like some of the people you can reach out to are the people who are already showing that they have interest in you. So just
100%.
continuing those conversations, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So as the business continues to grow, which stakeholder relationships would you say get more valuable versus the ones that are more of bottlenecks? Like you like
Yeah.
this person and you just want to stay stuck, but it's
Yeah.
probably not helpful for your growth.
Yeah, obviously early on, it's all about the believers, right? It's those first customers, those first champions. But then, as you start to scale, it's your operators and enablers that sort of become your critical stakeholders at that point. Your COO, your suppliers, key partners, key collaborators. As far as bottlenecks, ironically, they're often people who likely may used to be assets for you. Maybe it's a co-founder who for whatever reason you can't scale with. Perhaps an investor who's maybe risk averse. Especially when you need to make bold moves. The prep work is sort of, as I said, it's sort of the regular relationship audits, as you said, continuing the conversations. you know, um, I think it's really just about sitting down and asking yourself, is this person helping us grow? Or is this person holding us back? And it's about having the courage and being brave enough in that moment to pivot when the answer changes.
Mm. It does take courage. Because it's scary to go from the person you know to potentially a better fit, but it's like
Yeah,
you don't know that person.
yeah.
So, what would you recommend to a founder right now for them to just map their different like 5 stakeholder gaps
Hmm.
and what they can do to start filling out those gaps?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I often do is I'll grab a pen. I will draw 3 columns. One, who we have, who we need, and who we don't know yet. Those are the titles of my 3 columns. And then, at that point, I think for me anyway, that sort of allows me to think more like a strategist when I have these columns in front of me. Um, maybe you need to access a specific market. Maybe you need to access a specific channel partner. Maybe you're struggling with fundraising. Maybe it's a warm intro to a specific investor type of person. Then that sort of allows you to break it down at that point. Who do I know that knows them? What value can I offer before I ask for help? And offering value is very important. Instead of just going with something that you need, I think offering value in these moments are it's critical. And then what credibility do I need to earn their trust? And at the end of the day, that's sort of for me what it comes down to. It's less about the cold call or the LinkedIn DM or something like that. It's more about being intentional and human for me. At least that's what it's kind of become more of. And then your gaps sort of become goals at that point. And then your goals become your game plans. And it's interesting to me how that sort of cycles through your thinking process. So that's what I do. I get pen to paper and I write down those thoughts with those questions in mind.
You make it seem so simple, Amit.
It's not simple, but it's I think it's important to simplify it because it is so complicated.
That makes sense. Okay, so somebody watching this or listening to it, and they're like, this makes so much sense. This is what I've been trying to figure out. What
Yeah,
are 2 or 3 things that you would recommend, like concrete actions that they
yeah,
can take this week to start building these high quality stakeholder relationships?
yeah. Those are good questions. So practical things that we can actually do in action. So, and I may have mentioned some of these things throughout our conversation, Osai, but I'll reiterate. So I think the first thing, the most important thing to do is to show gratitude. Reach out with gratitude. And that can be in the form of a short note to someone who helped you early on, and not to ask for anything, as I mentioned off the top, but just to say thank you. And it sort of sets the tone and provides sort of an authentic base for your connection. The other thing I think I mentioned was add value before you ask. Bring something of value to the conversation. And again, different shapes and sizes, right? Share an article, make an intro, offer feedback, be useful in some way, be generous. Relationships, it's important to remember that relationships are not transactions, they're investments. And I think the more we start to think about relationships that way, the more effective we can utilize, the more effective they become for us to utilize. So, that's adding value to the conversation is really an important factor, and something that I try to practice all the time. And then, as I said off the top, create a 30-minute stakeholder block every week. No meetings, just outreach. Who do you want to know? Who do you want to know? Who do you want to learn from? Or who do you want to re-engage with? And reach out to those folks. To me, that time is sacred. No matter what I'm doing, no matter what industry I'm in, no matter what type of business I'm working in at the moment, there are always people that you can spend time with to better your vision, to better your clarity on that vision, and to just socialize and communicate what you're trying to accomplish. And I think the more people that get a hold of that, the better off you are at the end of the day.
Wow, that was so good. I feel like you put your 30 years of experience in like 5 minutes. That's so good. Thank you so much, Amit.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So for people who are listening to this and they're just kind of like, he has so much clarity and they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Search up my name, Amit Kumaria. Always up for real conversations. If anything I've said today has sparked a thought or made you realize you've got some relationship building to do, hit me up. I'm always happy to chat and talk and build relationships with any of you out there.
Thank you, Amit.
You're welcome. Thank you, Asai.